about dynamite. When it is set off, it will take the avenue of least resistance. Do you know that? It'll blow out on you if you're not careful. That's what Pilate was doing. He was trying to take the avenue of least resistance. It wasn't out of conviction. It was out of convenience. But he lost his soul because of it. You see, just as many reject Jesus because they hate what he reveals to them about themselves, others reject Jesus and their own convictions about him because they don't have the backbone to stand up against the current of unbelief. I really believe in America, it's just going to get worse. And you know, the stronger the current, the harder it is to withstand it. Takes more energy and strength. St. Creek was right down from the house when I was a boy. And most of the time it didn't have enough water in it to swim, but then summertime would come along, we'd get these flash floods, and it would be muddy and dirty and filthy, but boy, it'd be up. It'd also be swift. One day I was going with the current, and I got up, and there wasn't much of a swimmer now, but I took a paddle or two, and I'd be the length of this building. I mean, just lickety-split. Then the Three Stooges complex kicked in, and I decided to swim against the current. I found the bottom of that creek, nothing flat. It takes a lot of strength, a lot of energy, a lot of determination to go against the flow. And Pilate wasn't willing to do it. But Jesus issued a warning. Broad is the way, and many there be therein that go to the way of destruction. Going with the flow meant eternal death for Pilate and all of those that go with him. Then there's rejection by the populace. Most of the people that day in Jerusalem were shouting, "Crucify Jesus." I think we see here something of a mob mentality. We're told that people will get caught up and do things that they would normally never do when a mob breaks out. You know, there's a TV commercial about a particular satellite provider. And he says, don't settle for cable TV. They'll put you on hold. When they put you on hold, you get bored. When you get bored, you go out and you look for excitement, and it shows him hand gliding. And when you look for excitement, the power grid goes out. He flies right into the power line. And when the power goes out, there's this riot. And his poor old dad standing there, and he picks up a can of soup, and somebody punches him in the belly and steals that can of soup. And he says, don't let your daddy get punched for a can of soup. You know, I'm not at all sure that their cause and effect connects. Are you? But one little bit of truth that they did display is this mob mentality. And we're told that the chief priest stirred up the people, and all of a sudden they are all shouting in unison, "Crucify him, crucify him, crucify him." Now what is amazing about this is just a few days earlier, the streets were lined when Jesus entered. You remember that? And they're shouting, "Hosanna," which being translated is, "Save us now, we beseech thee. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." I want to suggest to you that when they were shouting, "Hosanna," just caught up in the crowd. Didn't really mean anything to them, and now they're caught up in the crowd again. I call it the man mold, not masculine, but people pottery, molding us by society. And understand something, it doesn't have to be violent. Well, I don't curse either. I don't yell for his blood. You know, we can reject Jesus with the masses by doing nothing, by our silence, not speaking up. I recall one of those rather silly little tests from psychology in college where they had a control group of 3 or 4 people in on the test, and they would go to a tall building, and they would get on the elevator on the first floor, hopefully an empty elevator. And they would push the top button where they'd be on there for a while. And they would get on there and they would turn and face the back of the elevator. Now we've seen elevators that had doors on both sides, but this one had nothing in the back, but they'd just stand there. Well, that thing would get up to the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floor, and it'd stop and people would get on. You know what they'd do most of the time when they'd get on? They'd press their floor and they'd look at the back of the elevator like everybody else. They didn't want to be different. It'd make it that way all the way to the top. People would be standing there looking at the back of the elevator. I think I'll start preaching this way. You like it? It doesn't make any sense, does it? They just did it because everybody else was doing it, and they didn't want to stand there looking the opposite direction of everybody else. After all, they wanted to fit in. That's what's going on here. They just fitting in. Just going along. You know, the parental admonition fits well here. If everybody was jumping off a cliff, would you? You know, many times that's exactly what people are doing. They're jumping off the cliff because other people are. It is amazing to me how rapid attitudes change because of the mass media telling us that that's the right thing to do. Then finally, there was the rejection by the praetorium. And this passage was long, I almost left it out, but there's something different going on here. Notice they took him and they called the entire cohort. All of them got in on it. And look at the cruelty of their ridicule. There was physical abuse and there was mental abuse. They made a crown of thorns. They placed it on his head. They took a reed and they hit him on the head over and over and over and over again. But the mental abuse was probably much worse, wasn't it? They put that purple robe on his back, a symbol of royalty. Crown of thorns. Matthew tells us that they would hit him while he was blindfolded and say, "All right, prophet, tell me who hit you." They would kneel. They spit on him. I recall seeing just briefly, and I think it was posted on the internet, don't think the news even carried it, where when Saddam Hussein was about to be hanged, a person went by and slapped him and said something to him. And you know, even as many people as he was responsible for killing, it just rubs us the wrong way to see him ridiculed and mocked right before he's executed, doesn't it? Jesus was. What was going on here? Was this just pure hatred? Well, probably some of those old Roman soldiers were just as sadistic as you could be because of their job. But I think something else is going on here. When Jesus was standing before them, he didn't look human anymore. Mark doesn't tell us the whole story. Matthew tells us that Pilate had him beaten with that cat of 9 tails as was depicted in the movie there. And his body was shredded to ribbons. You see, they were assessing their evaluation of Jesus based upon what others said and did. Now let's move away from that just a little bit. If you take your assessment of Christians today based on the 6 o'clock news, then they are loveless, hateful, self-righteous, mean people. Even Christian companies like Chick-fil-A, just mean-spirited. And when he took a stand on traditional Christian marriage, the media wouldn't hush. And the other day, when he ordered that people stranded on the streets be fed, where was the 6 o'clock news? So if you base your assessment on Christians with what you hear out there, and even of Christ, what you hear out there, you probably will reject him. But understand, it's an inaccurate depiction of who he is. Now, the day's coming when everyone will come to the realization that rejecting the Redeemer is a foolish mistake. But you know what? On that day, it's going to be too late to change your position. Now is the accepted time. Today is the day of salvation. You know, that was written thousands of years ago, and it's just as true today as it ever was. Now, what does it mean? You can't be saved yesterday, and you can't be saved tomorrow. Now, there is this warning that we don't know what tomorrow will bring, but what's the little saying about tomorrow? Never comes. You know, the devil's not worried about what you're going to do tomorrow. His greatest weapon is that of delay. Today is accepted time. Are you here this morning and you've been listening to some of the lies of the devil and you've rejected Jesus? Maybe you're young, maybe you're middle-aged, maybe you're old. Don't listen to those lies. But you know, most of you are Christians, and I really believe that you are. But maybe you've kind of gotten tired of the battle. And the current is washing you instead of you standing against it. You're going with the flow instead of standing in opposition when you know you need to take a stand. Maybe you need to come this morning and just ask God for his strength and his power and leave with a renewed determination. Maybe there's some other commitment or decision that you need to make. You do what God would have you to do. Let's pray.